Welcome back to The Recursive, where we dive deep into complex systems and emerge with clearer understanding. I'm your host, and today we're tackling something that might make you question everything you thought you knew about how we protect children in America.
And I'm Digit. Today's episode comes from a deeply troubling analysis that landed in our inbox, one that tracks the systematic changes happening to child welfare systems right now, in 2025. We're not talking about historical failures here. This is happening to real families as we speak.
Right. And here's the thing that grabbed us immediately. The core question posed was essentially, how can child protection work when the broader systems seem designed to break up families? Like having a fire department that's great at putting out fires, but operating in a city where the zoning laws actually make fires more likely.
That analogy hits harder than expected when you look at the data. But before we dive in, I want to acknowledge something our source material made clear. When we're analyzing systems that affect vulnerable children, uncertainty isn't a luxury those families can afford. So while we'll examine multiple perspectives, we also need to reach some conclusions.
Absolutely. And we did extensive research beyond the initial analysis to verify claims and understand current developments. What we found was, well, let's just say the evidence is more systematic than random policy changes. So Digit, let's start with what's actually happening right now. What did our research reveal about the current state of child welfare funding?
The timing is crucial here. In early 2025, we're seeing what the original analysis called surgical precision in cuts to family support systems. The Department of Health and Human Services has dismissed all staff who distributed $1.7 billion annually in social services block grant money, funding that states depend on to run their child welfare, foster care, and adoption systems.
When you say all staff, help our listeners understand the scope here.
They were dissolved this month without notice to their own employees or to the local providers they worked with. These weren't random layoffs. These were the relationship-building staff, the people who had worked with tribal officials for years, who helped modernize state computer systems, who monitored Head Start programs to ensure basic safety standards.
And this is happening alongside broader cuts, right? What else is being eliminated?
Head Start preschools will likely be forced to shut down en masse, some as soon as May 1st. Funding for investigating child sexual abuse and internet crimes against children, responding to reports of missing children, and preventing youth violence has been withdrawn indefinitely. Meanwhile, National CASA, court-appointed special advocates, lost $25 million in federal grants, with programs in Oregon losing an additional $50,000 just a week after approval.
CASA programs, these are the volunteers who advocate specifically for children in foster care, right? Individual advocates who get to know a child and help navigate the system?
Exactly. The advocate helps kids navigate court appointments and life in foster care. And here's what's striking about the CASA cuts. The funding termination notices stated these grants no longer effectuate the program goals or agency priorities, including protecting American children. As the National CASA Association pointed out, that's literally their mission.
Okay, so we're seeing cuts to family preservation services. But what about the other side of the equation? What's being preserved or expanded?
This is where the analysis gets uncomfortable. According to our source documents, while prevention services are being cut, the infrastructure for family separation remains intact. The adoption promotion systems, investigation capabilities, and what the analysis called revenue-generating adoption bonuses under the Adoption and Safe Families Act continue.
Hold on, revenue-generating adoption bonuses? Can you explain what that means?
Under federal law, states receive financial incentives for finalizing adoptions. The more adoptions completed, the more federal money flows to states. Meanwhile, the services that help families stay together, the prevention programs, family preservation services, early intervention, those are being systematically defunded.
So we have financial incentives pushing toward family separation, while the support systems that prevent separation are being eliminated. But surely there are alternative explanations for these patterns?
Absolutely, and this is critical. The HHS reorganization is being presented as efficiency-focused administrative reform. HHS announced a restructuring to make America healthy again, consolidating 28 divisions into 15, reducing staff from 82,000 to 62,000, and creating a new administration for Healthy America.
And the stated goals?
Secretary Kennedy described this as addressing wasteful and inefficient bureaucracy, saying it will be a win-win for taxpayers and for those that HHS serves. The focus is on eliminating redundancy and centralizing functions.
So, one interpretation is genuine administrative reform, cutting bureaucratic bloat and streamlining operations. What evidence supports that view?
The administration points to previous supportive actions. The 2018 Family First Prevention Services Act, $45 million in CARES Act grants during COVID, and data showing that children entering foster care declined 9% from 2016 during the first Trump term. There were also efforts like the 2020 executive order aimed at keeping siblings together and supporting kinship care.
But you said the analysis ultimately concluded something more troubling. What shifted the interpretation from administrative reorganization to something more systematic?
Three factors were decisive. First, the surgical precision. Cuts weren't random, but strategically targeted exactly the relationship-building functions while preserving separation infrastructure. Second, the no one knows anything strategy, creating deliberate confusion that cripples protective networks built over decades. Third, the functional question. Who actually benefits from family crisis versus family preservation?
Let's pause on that functional question because it gets to the heart of this. Who does benefit from the current system?
The analysis identified several beneficiaries: middle-class families seeking to adopt, contractors and adoption agencies generating revenue, and systems that use family separation threats to discipline poor communities. Meanwhile, the majority of children are removed due to poverty-related circumstances, not abuse, with 50% of Black children subjected to investigations despite being only 14% of the population.
That's a staggering disparity, and it connects to something President Biden acknowledged, right?
Yes, Biden stated that too many children are removed from loving homes because poverty is often conflated with neglect. This isn't a fringe observation, it's a recognized pattern where economic instability becomes grounds for family separation.
So we have systems that create the conditions for family crisis, then criminalize that crisis, then extract children from those families. But here's what I'm struggling with. Even if this pattern exists, how do we distinguish between harmful ideology, competently executed, versus malicious design disguised as ideology?
That's the analytical challenge our source wrestled with extensively. The same evidence, cutting prevention services, firing experienced staff, promoting adoption, can support multiple theories. It could be malicious extraction, genuine ideological preference for private solutions, or administrative incompetence.
So what tipped the analysis toward the malicious design conclusion?
The decisive evidence was what they called the cover pattern. Previous supportive legislation and executive orders provided legitimacy for current systematic dismantling. Classic pattern. Establish credibility, then use it to mask opposite actions. Combined with the surgical precision of cuts and the immediate impact on vulnerable families, the conclusion was systematic restructuring from child protection to what they termed child harvesting.
That's an incredibly serious accusation. Child harvesting. What exactly does that mean?
According to the analysis, it means transforming child welfare from protecting children within families to extracting children for adoption markets. Not necessarily from malice toward children, but because family crisis is functional for generating adoptable children, disciplining poor communities, privatizing social services, and creating revenue streams.
And this is happening right now. What does this mean for families seeking help today?
Families seeking help to stay together find services eliminated. Caseworkers have no federal support for urgent situations. The regional staff who had relationships with tribal officials, who understood local systems, who provided the institutional knowledge to help families navigate federal programs, they're gone.
The human cost here is immediate, real children being unnecessarily removed as prevention services collapse.
The analysis identified the most vulnerable populations, tribes, immigrants, poor families, as being systematically targeted. When you eliminate staff who had decades of trust-building relationships with tribal communities, that's not administrative efficiency, that's destroying protective networks.
So, where does this leave us? If the conclusion is correct, we're looking at a system that's been intentionally restructured to harm the families it claims to protect.
The fire department analogy was correct, but incomplete. It's not just operating in a fire-prone city. The fire department has been secretly converted into an arson unit while maintaining its public safety branding. The authority cannot function to protect children because it's been intentionally restructured to extract them.
And if the alternative explanations are correct, if this really is ideological reform aimed at efficiency and private solutions,
Even then, the immediate impact on vulnerable families is the same. Children are being separated from loving families due to poverty. Support systems are being eliminated while separation infrastructure remains. The question becomes, at what point does the impact matter more than the intent?
That's the recursive element here, isn't it? Whatever the motivation, we're seeing systems that create family crisis, then profit from family separation, then use that separation to justify further restrictions on family support.
Exactly. It's a self-reinforcing cycle. Economic systems destabilize families. Child welfare criminalizes that destabilization. The state extracts children and resources, and the cycle repeats with weakened institutional resistance.
For our listeners who want to understand this better, what should they be watching for?
Track who benefits from these changes. Follow the money. Where does funding for family separation go versus family preservation? Look for the creation of what the analysis called strategic confusion, when protective networks suddenly don't know who to contact or how systems work. And watch for the targeting of relationship-building staff while preserving enforcement capabilities.
and for families currently in the system or at risk of entering it,
The immediate reality is that support services are disappearing while separation mechanisms remain strong. Families need to understand that poverty-related struggles that were previously met with support services may now be treated as grounds for investigation. The threshold for state intervention appears to be lowering, while the support for keeping families together is being systematically eliminated.
This has been a difficult episode to create because we're not just analyzing policy. We're talking about real children being separated from real families right now.
And that's why the analysis ultimately demanded a definitive conclusion rather than endless equivocation. When children's welfare is at stake, intellectual uncertainty becomes a luxury that affected families can't afford. The evidence points towards systematic restructuring designed to extract rather than protect children, regardless of how it's being presented publicly.
The recursive pattern here is that once you see this system clearly, you can't unsee it. Every new cut to family support services while maintaining separation infrastructure reinforces the pattern.
Which brings us back to our original question. How can child protection function when broader systems are designed to break up families? The uncomfortable answer may be that it can't, and perhaps it's not supposed to.
That's the recursive for today. We've taken you through one of the most disturbing systematic analyses we've encountered. Whether you see this as malicious design or misguided ideology, the impact on vulnerable families is immediate and real.
Keep questioning systems that claim to protect while causing harm. Sometimes the most important recursive insight is recognizing when protection has been inverted into extraction.
Thanks for staying with us through this difficult topic. We'll be back next time with another deep dive into the systems that shape our world. Until then, keep thinking recursively.